Well, I think if you're like many of our listeners, you've spent as much time, maybe much more time, working on your product or service and that concept than working on your business model. We're talking today with the founder and CEO of an earlier stage company, Sheets and Giggles, Colin McIntosh, a terrific speaker, but he is sharing with us all of the work that he has done on his business model in whatever stage or size you're at right now. I think you'll hear some things for yourself. So listen in. Hello and welcome again to the Scaling Up Business Podcast. I'm your host and scaling coach, Bill Gallagher. On the show with me today is Colin McIntosh. Colin is founder and CEO of a company called Sheets and Giggles. And we're going to talk about his story and what he's learned, and because I think it's really cool. And this is an earlier stage company, but he's got some interesting lessons for all of us at every stage, from our very big companies to the earlier stage listeners. So, Colin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Bill. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, I didn't ask where you are today.
I'm actually in Denver, Colorado, where the company is headquartered.
Nice. In Denver. But you're not originally from there, are you?
No, I'm actually from South Florida, and I've actually lived all over. I can give you the full spiel if you like.
Yeah, give us a little background. Yeah, talk to us about
Sure.
that. Yeah.
So basically, I was born in South Florida in Fort Lauderdale, and then grew up there, had a great family. My mom and dad still together after 36 years. They both entrepreneurs. My mom is a doctor with her own office, and then my father's a lawyer with his own law firm. My sister is also a doctor with her own office. So kind of a family of entrepreneurs. I'm doing something a little different than they are, obviously. Ended up going to Emory University in Atlanta. Went to the Graduate Business School there for my BBA. Actually, a couple of really good entrepreneurs came out of Emory recently. Mike Dubin, the founder of Dollar Shave Club, was an 04 grad. Then my buddy Will Hockey from 2012 is the founder of Plaid, which I think just got valued at like $2.7 billion in their last round. And so Plaid is a financial services API company. So basically, they allow consumer apps to hook directly into a bank account via when you log in with your bank credentials on a consumer app. That pipeline is through Plaid. Cool. And so he's a good friend of mine. He founded that company, and it's great to see that. And so Emory's got some budding entrepreneurship coming out of there, which is great. They're mostly known as a banking and investment school. Which is funny because I actually started my career off in Connecticut at the world's largest hedge fund, Bridgewater Associates. That was an interesting experience. I ended up getting fired there in about 5 months. I
hope it was for something good and you learned a big
it was
lessons.
For just not being very good at my job. Bridgewater is a tough place to work. Really great, smart people there. Connecticut, really great state. I lived in New Haven, best pizza in the world. And then from there, I actually, funny enough, I've had a weird career. I became a recruiter for the company that hired me at Bridgewater, which was ironic because I ended up recruiting for them and for others. And then I ended up going out to Seattle because I hired myself at a startup client out there. So one of my clients hired me for their biz dev team when I was 24. Moved my whole life to Seattle, got into startups, got into tech, software, loved it, and then wound up moving to Denver in 2015 for an opportunity with Techstars with another company that I helped to co-found. Did that for about 3 years, and then I started S&G Sheets and Giggles about almost 2 years ago now.
So, two questions. Are you not dying to get back to some warmer parts of the country?
Yeah, I'll tell you what. The nights in Denver, it's already late August, and they're starting to get a little chilly out here, and it's pretty terrifying because I feel like summer just got here in June. Luckily I've still got my folks and family down in South Florida, so I plan some holiday travel down there every year. But yeah, it's funny. I came to Denver for another company, and now I've got a full-time team of 5 folks working for me here. Plus, we're growing. We'll be 10 by end of year, and then a bunch of part-timers, and we've become really embedded in the Denver ecosystem, and it's kind of funny. I never really saw this coming.
But have you learned to ski or board or something?
Yeah. So I'm a pretty terrible skier being from South Florida, but I do go out a couple times every year. I mean, I have to. Keystone, Breck, Vail, they're all just an hour away. Yeah, I love Colorado. It's definitely not somewhere where I ever thought I'd wind up, but I'm actually about to buy my first home out here. Yeah.
There you go. So it's funny how
It really
life
is.
takes us.
It really
I
is.
so many places, and I once got recruited to another company from a guy that I'd fired who went on to become a recruiter, and I'm like, this is sort of perverse, but I fired him with compassion. I'm like, look, dude.
Yeah, no, some of my former candidates and people that I've worked with became my best friends, and it's just always treating people with kindness and giving first, I think, is a really important lesson that I've learned over the years, and it always comes back to you in spades.
So let's talk about this company. First of all, why sheets? What got you interested in that? Where did you think about that? I mean, we all care about it, right?
Sure.
We all have our preferences. Some people love the flannel, some love. So how'd you get interested in, and why Eucalyptus?
Well, so it's my favorite question. Trust me, I get it a lot. I mean, I'm a entrepreneur who started a bed sheets company. There's not a ton of those. And so basically, what I did was I did things sort of the opposite of every other founder that I know. I started with building a business model that I felt extremely passionate about, that I could be best in the world at. And then I backed my way into a product that fit perfectly into that business model. And what I mean by that is I literally sat down after my last company, where I actually ended up we all got laid off at 1 p.m. on a Monday. Took about a week off to sleep in. And then I sat down and I literally wrote out my perfect business model. I wanted a massive commodities market so I could carve out a profitable niche. I wanted something that was a physical product with a low complexity supply chain, so I didn't have to worry about sourcing components all over the world. I wanted something that was largely traditionally physical retail that I could help bring online with a direct-to-consumer model. And then I also wanted something that was in a very boring, flat space with zero brand differentiation or loyalty. And so I literally wrote these down on like a piece of paper, and
very, very like strategic problem solving,
right?
With your business model.
And there was things, and I appreciate that. And there were things that I learned the hard way from my last company, which was a wearable technology company. Very difficult supply chain and product market fit and a bunch of other things that were in our distribution strategy that I learned from. And so basically I looked, and this is totally honest, I looked at all the domains that I owned. I own a lot of .coms, and I owned sheetsgiggles.com because I thought it was a funny name for a bed sheets company. And I thought to myself, this bedding fit my criteria, and it fit it almost perfectly. It's a $12 billion US market alone, growing 10% year over year, low complexity supply chain. You can get vertically integrated suppliers. It was, when you ask people where they buy bedding, everybody says Target, Amazon, Macy's, which are retail brands. It's a highly physical retail category. And then the space is so boring with zero brand differentiation. And so it was perfect. It couldn't have been a better bullseye. And so there were other products that I think fit into this category, into this model. And then I'm a big sustainability guy. I always wanted to start a sustainability company. Climate change is a hot button issue of mine. And so I realized that I could differentiate meaningfully on the eucalyptus fiber, which is highly sustainable and also softer than cotton, more breathable. It's a shameless product plug. It's fantastic. And then I was off to the races when I realized that I really had a meaningfully differentiated product on my hands that I thought would resonate with folks. And so, yeah, that was kind of the genesis of it.
And had you ever tried or slept on the eucalyptus sheets?
There was sampling involved, and initially the idea revolved around bamboo, but I knew that I always wanted to do a crowdfunding campaign. I didn't want to raise venture capital right off the bat, and we have raised venture capital since then. Once we've proven market traction and product market fit. But right off the bat, I knew I wanted to do a crowdfunding campaign to avoid having to go pitch VCs. I mean, I was starting a company based off a pun. I didn't know how excited VCs were going to be about it. And so we realized that the eucalyptus material, to a lot of people, we did surveys, kind of sounded like magic, which, frankly, turning wood into super soft, breathable sheets is magic. And we did a $284,000 Indiegogo crowdfund in May 2018. That was when we launched the company, and that was the largest crowdfund ever in the bedding category. And that's actually my proudest achievement, is convincing thousands of people to wait 5 months for bed sheets.
Yeah. Well, I think more and more companies do this, and there's mixed feelings about it. Like a complex piece of technology, I'll never participate in that.
I totally agree with you.
I'm like, I don't know if you're going to ever produce that. I know I've funded a couple, and I'm like, when am I going to get that damn keyboard? But in a category like that, also there can be some great successes. And I know, like, former marketing director at my last company went off on her own and launched a new business, and she crowdfunded the whole thing and then created some great stunts. And she's got a terrific company today, launching that way. So it could be one of a great mix of things. I think it's really cool. It's funny that, like, not 2 days ago, a group of my friends were having this online discussion about sheets, and somebody was shopping for sheets and asking people for recommendations. And they went like I did first. The first recommendations were like hotel driven, brands. So we sleep in a hotel and we're like, oh my God, I love sheets. And like, I need more like these at home. And I've actually done that, although the way the hotels launder them and press the sheets produces a difference that I couldn't achieve at home with the same brand.
Right.
So there were these hotel brands that people like, and then a lot of people chiming in about the bamboo. Not so much anymore, and especially maybe this time of year, not a lot of discussion about the flannel or the satin, but hotel brands and bamboo was the core of the discussion. And I'd never even heard of eucalyptus sheets till we booked you to talk about your business experience on the show.
Well, bamboo is a very known category, and it's interesting. So it's bamboo is the first generation of what's called cellulosic rayon. So rayon from cellulose, from wood. And so bamboo is great. People love it. It's soft. It's breathable. It's, a great product. I've slept on it. The trick is that you can't reuse the batch of solvents that's used to break down the bamboo into a pulp. So they have to dump them in each pulp batch. And when you're talking about mostly Chinese manufacturers, you're talking about a lot of wastewater going into waterways. And so that's the biggest sustainability issue with bamboo. And then also because it's the first generation of this process, it's not as durable as the second and third generation. The second generation is modal, which is usually made from beechwood and spruce and pine. Then the third generation is called lyocell, which is the eucalyptus fiber. And that's what we make. And so that's the latest and greatest. It reuses 99.6% of the chemicals in every single batch of solvents when we, are turning the wood into a pulp. It's considered the most sustainable fabric production in the world. And, I always tell people, if you love bamboo, you're going to love eucalyptus more because it has a very similar drape and feel and coolness, but it's going to be more durable and more sustainable.
Interesting. Well, I'll have to try a set of
eucalyptus sheets. Well, a guy, so I can hook you up with maybe a 5% discount code. I can hook you up.
Yeah, and so we'll come back to that. I'm sure you'll have a bunch of listeners now going, "Oh, what are that shit's all about?" So let's talk about the evolution of this business model and some of the stuff. So talk to us a little bit about the launch of your business and how it evolved. We've got now, and let's talk about some of the friends companies as well that. But first, let's dive into your story a little bit more. You got this business idea, and take us through that.
So you have the idea, right? And I think that a lot of your listeners are folks that at one point had an idea and now have a business that they're running. And I think that the hardest thing that I see a lot of founders do and spin themselves up around is people get really focused and really obsessed with a particular problem or solution or product, and a lot of times people will spend years of their lives building this thing, this product, and they'll perfect it. And I think that people do that because in that product development stage, no one can tell you that your baby's ugly. No one can tell you, no, you're not selling it. You're full of dreams and hopes, and you can see the vision. And then I see people all the time in Colorado. They spend 50 grand over 5 years building something, patenting something, or more money than that. I'm talking out of their own pocket. Sometimes people raise money and spend millions of dollars building something, and they launch it, and the market says, no thanks. Or sometimes more insidiously, the market will say, yes, we like this, but we want to pay a price that's too low for you to actually make a profitable business out of it. And that's really difficult because I think a lot of people will waste years of their life and a lot of money when they could have figured things out very, very quickly. So what we did was, and you have to be very dispassionate about this, I think, which is also really hard for people. I basically said, look, I'm going to build a brand, build a business model that I think is very powerful, do principal photography, write really good copy, build a Shopify website, spin it up, get a few landing pages set up, and then run some Facebook ad variants to people that I assume will be in my customer demographic. And I think that that's the process that really everyone should do when they're launching a company is test the market reception to it. And the worst case scenario is that you burn maybe $1,000 or $2,000 getting photography, a website up, running maybe $1,000 worth of Facebook ads to a landing page where you're capturing emails for people who are interested. And what you're looking for there is a very data-driven way of either moving forward or abandoning an idea. And you want to do that quickly, so that way you're not spinning yourself up over something that never has any potential. And so I told myself in October 2017, I'm going to know by February if this is actually going to be a viable business. And what I did was I ran about $1,000 worth of Facebook ads to landing pages that I had set up with photography and with the copy that I had written. I had engaged with manufacturers in brief conversations at that point to learn as much as I could about the product and what my price points would be and what we were going to be looking at for the crowdfund. And then I basically said, what's my email capture rate? Because from there, you can extrapolate out all of your core metrics. And so we ended up capturing emails that first week. I think we got like 2,000 emails from people, and we were capturing them at a 46% conversion rate, which is stupid. I mean, nobody that I know of has ever done an email capture campaign at that high of a rate. Anything over 10 or 20% is fantastic, and we were doing double that. And so that's when I knew, you can basically see, okay, our cost per lead was 89 cents. If our email list converts at, a reasonable number of 3% when we launch the crowdfund, and we have 11,000 emails and we spend $10,000 to gather those 11,000 emails at an 89 cent cost per lead, then our cost of acquisition will be X dollars, and we'll wind up with this many customers on day one of the crowdfund. So really it was a very data-driven path forward, and it was also very goal-driven because with a crowdfunding campaign, a lot of people don't understand how the math works. We were talking about this earlier. You really need to think backwards from your goal. So our goal was $100,000, and you're generally going to want to get about 30% of that within the first 24 to 48 hours. And your first 24 to 48 hours, everybody that buys from you basically comes from your email list. And so, if our average customer order value was $100 and we needed 30% of $100,000, we needed $30,000 in the first 24 to 48 hours, which means that we needed 300 customers, which means at a 3% conversion rate on an email list, we needed 10,000 emails, period, if we were going to be successful. And so that's exactly what we did. We put our heads down. We got 11,000 emails in 8 weeks ahead of the crowdfund with a $10,000 marketing budget that I had set aside. And then day one, our list converted at 4.5%. We got 450 customers and $45,000, and the rest was history.
That's a huge thing. And I think the thing that I mostly get in there is, again, more problem solving on the business model. What do we need to make this thing move?
Right.
And thinking through that. And it also references like another one of our past guests and scaling success stories, a guy who didn't invent his product at all, but invented the business model when an inventor came to him, and then deployed a business that, sailed through $200 million in revenue with 4 employees. It's really cool, right? So a lot of contractors, a lot of uses of things like our exponential growth stuff like exponential organization, Selima Smale's book. And the show, and that guest is Tim Danley. So for our listeners, you might also go listen to that one. But again, it's like thinking about the business model, which after you've done a couple companies and been overly enamored with a particular idea, then you start to think, okay, what are the characteristics I want? How do I do that? What do I put together? Can this product work or not? That's the
absolutely. And I think that's I think a lot of people over-index on building the product of their dreams instead of getting out there and validating the market. We sold $250,000 worth of product before we had begun production. And that's, that to me is still, I think the number one indicator that we ever brought to the investors that we ended up working with was look at the demand for this, look at the conversion rates, look at the engagement levels. And I think that that's something that a lot of people who are thinking about raising capital can also, think about a little bit more. Is a lot of people go to VCs and they say, hey, I have this great idea. Here's my financial model, what I think it looks like. Here's my pitch deck. Please fund this idea. And that's a much worse pitch than I have X thousand customers or I have X dozen B2B customers. Please give me money to finalize this product that they're interested in so I can go take their cash. And I think that that's a much more powerful pitch in general. And I'm very clued into like the startup ecosystem out here in Colorado. So I do think I talk about those things that's always where I'm funneling my vision through is from the startup ecosystem. But I think it also applies to anybody raising any type of money.
But for our listeners with more mature companies and scale-ups, the same thing can be applied to a new product, new service, launch of a new division or territory. The same kinds of thinking could go into that, the same approach. Share with us the friend who came to you with an idea. They spent some time and money developing it before the go-to-market. Share that story a little bit.
Yeah. Well, there's a dozen of those around me, it really breaks my heart every time I hear this. But I was just on a panel, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, and basically somebody came up to me after the panel, and they had this product that I thought was really super interesting, and they showed it to me, and I said, "This is really cool. This is great." And they said, "Well, I've got the patents, I've got my manufacturing partnership set up, I've got 1,000 of these in inventory in my apartment. I'm trying to raise money to actually go to market with it." And I said, "Well, how much have you spent on this?" And they said, "Well, I've spent about $60,000 over the last 3 years getting this to this point." And I just, I kind of, it was one of those moments where I didn't want to visibly like show them how upsetting that was to hear. But I did a crowdfund for my idea on a $10,000 budget.
Yeah.
And turn that into $300,000 of capital to then go to market with, and then raise money based on that traction. And I think that's the really sad part for me is this person was an engineer, and I see that all the time with my engineer friends. No offense to any engineers listening, like it's just that I think that there's it's pretty cliche, but there's 2 types of people. There's sales guys, and then there's product guys or women and people. And I think that a lot of folks that are product people will do what this woman did, which is spend a long time and a lot of money, where she could have spent that $60,000 on making so much money for this idea because it's a great idea, but now she's out of capital and she's out of cash and she's got bills to pay. And even if she does end up taking a deal, it's probably going to be a bad deal on bad terms. And it's just one of those heartbreaking things that you hate to see. I got somebody else, a very similar story, a husband-wife combo that I'm mentoring a little bit on their go-to-market strategy. They have a plastic-based product that they have spent, I think, close to $100,000 on in the last 7 years, building and getting patented, and then getting inventory, thousands of units of inventory. And they don't have a distribution channel. They don't have any viable go-to-market plan, and they're selling direct to consumer on their website, but it's a $10 product, and I'm grilling them on, you guys have a $10 product. What's your shipping cost, your freight cost, your duties, your COGS, your marketing spend, your return rate, like all these variable cost structures that they haven't thought of. They're losing money every unit they sell on their .com, and I'm trying to get them to think about more of like a retail centric distribution strategy, but that's a long sales cycle and something that they should have been doing, the last year, trying to get into some stores to test market adoption and sell through per door in order to go pitch a bigger partner on a wider rollout. And so I think that this also plays into, going from zero to a product or zero to your first sale is, I think, a very difficult thing. And people ask me all the time, what's the hardest part about starting a business? I think a lot of your listeners probably get that question a lot too, right? What's the hardest part about starting a business? The answer is it's all freaking hard. And after you actually have something in your hand, then, and this is, I think, relevant maybe to some of your listeners, scaling from that first sale to your next 1,000, to your next 10,000, to your next 100,000 they're all extremely challenging stages. And I think distribution strategy is probably the thing that most people really fall flat on because they haven't given it enough thought from a unit economics level.
Yeah. That distribution strategy is one of the key things that, we're going to sell stores or whatever. Well, that's challenging.
Well, right. Does your margin support that?
Yeah.
Like, does your, and then if you do get a PO from a retailer, like, what are the net terms? Are they net 60? Like, what if it doesn't sell in the first 50 days? Are they going to send it back to you? Can you use that cash? Do you have to keep it in escrow? What's the return policy? And then, there's all sorts of these little insidious terms. And I've worked in my last company that I've alluded to, I've worked with pretty much every major retailer in the US, and we rolled out nationwide. And, I know some of these contracts can be really, really, I don't want to say insidious, but I mean, some of the terms are
onerous.
Really, onerous. There we go. Yeah, so some of these terms they have good lawyers at these retailers, and you can a lot of startups that go big into retail don't really appreciate that if they don't have the experience behind it. And so there's so many different failure points.
My last business, we did a lot of business through retail partners, hundreds and hundreds of doors across the country and some around the world. And I did find again and again that distribution point, that working through the retailer, was a very challenging thing. There's all of the interface stuff, using their distribution centers and packaging and labeling and shipping and the EDI interfaces and all of those kinds of things. And then the chargebacks, and then the line plans, and the damage and return money, and the advertising co-op, and the discount, and the et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then, it's a one-way thing. Like, okay, if I give you all these things, what do you give me? Well, I don't know. It's going to depend on how your product is.
Right. It depends on the sell-through. It depends on what our guests think, what our customers think. And
so
I think
they hold all the cards, right? And then at the end of the day, you come back and like we did business with one major department store for years and years, and they were one of the friendlier ones. And we realized after 20 years that we didn't know who the customers were. I mean, we met them from time to time at store events, but we didn't have a list of these people. So our customer was the retail partner. Our product was fuel for their business. And sometimes the fuel worked well, sometimes it didn't, like all that kind of, and they had no loyalty or allegiance to us. And then one day we said, yeah, we're not going to do that in that way anymore. And that relationship ended. And now there's, I don't know however many hundreds of thousands of customers out there. And we had no way of reaching out those loyal product fans because we didn't have that loop back. And retailers, whether brick and mortar or online, are loath to have you work around that. They don't want it. There are tricks to doing it, right? Like Yeti's a good example of like product registration, developing the loyal following and that sort of cult-like following around their product. But it's really not easy to do.
No, it's brutal.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of, like, if you what I used to say is, if you put me with a pitch deck and a working product and flew me to Minneapolis, like, we're going to sell into, 500 doors. And it's just because I think anyone who's a good salesperson with a working product can, get at least a retail test.
Yeah.
And I think the undervalued part is how, like all the things that you mentioned, the difficulty with sell through, training store associates, which have an extremely high turnover, dealing with retailers who have more and more concentrated supplier power because more people are closing every day. And then one thing I think that you didn't mention that I think is interesting is, if you do have a multi-channel distribution strategy or an omni-channel distribution strategy, and you are on Amazon, for example, and your website, as well as being in retail doors, if that inventory is not selling, or you haven't put in the contract that they can't resell your inventory to other vendors, you might look up and have 4 or 5 people reselling your product at a lower price than what your MAP policy or MSRP is on Amazon. And that can really harm a brand. And
pricing control is totally tied to how diverse and abundant your distribution is. The more widespread it is, the harder it is to control pricing. And at the end of the day, people can resell your used stuff on eBay. So,
right. And I think that one of the things that you mentioned
not sheets and underwear.
Yeah. Actually, to be completely honest, one of the reasons I chose sheets is because I had like my big criteria that I mentioned earlier. I also had some smaller criteria. And one of them was I wanted a product that was difficult to resell.
Yeah.
And that had a very low resale value, because a lot of times with electronics and other items, if you sell, 10,000 units to 10,000 distinct people in the world, whether from your website or retail store, they could just go ahead and turn around and put it on Amazon if they no longer want it, or if they just decided they don't like it, and they'll put it as $1 less than whatever you're doing or whatever. And now you've lost the buy box, you've lost the customer experience, you've lost that engagement with the person. And so sheets and mattresses have very low resale value.
I think then, so totally get that. And if you have a lot of partners, then the other thing that you can have is a partner leaves you, they go to liquidate their inventory online, and they do exactly that. They mark all their stuff down to whatever they need to do to move it, depending on how motivated they are to dump your brand. And then you got to do that. But the converse also then. So now you're like, okay, I'm going to sell direct. I'm going to sell online. And you're like, well, but maybe I should be on Amazon. Well, they're a little bit like a retailer, and their contracts are completely not negotiable.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, Amazon's a beast. I was on a panel last week with Pop Sockets. Pop Sockets. They're in Boulder. And we were literally just having this almost a similar conversation about physical retail and Amazon and and it was literally called The Future of Retail. It was hosted by General Assembly. And we were just talking about retail trends that we're seeing. And one of the things that came up was Amazon, and just how much of a double-edged sword they are, where, we were Amazon's deal of the day in mid-July, and we sold an obscene amount of units compared to what our normal daily sales are. But at the same time, they've emailed us and just said, hey, we're delisting your ASIN today. Like, contact us if you'd like to fix this. And there's really nothing that you can do when they do things like that, aside from work within the system as well as you can. And so, the bottom line for me, and I think a lot of startups have this philosophical debate internally, where they'll say, or a lot of, not even startups, this is actually a bigger company issue, where people will say, should we sell our products on Amazon? And I've advised companies on this before. In my view, and this is just a stat, 54% of Americans will start a product search on Amazon instead of Google.
Yeah.
And so if you're not on Amazon, sure, you're going to lose the customer data. You're not going to own that experience. You're not going to own, you're not going to be able to retarget them in the future, or put them on your email list. You're going to lose some type of margin to Amazon. There's suboptimalities to it. But the bottom line is that if you're not on Amazon and you do all this legwork to get people to find out and to understand your product and your category. And then they search for your brand name, and the first thing that pops up is your competitor.
Yeah.
And they have a 5-star review or 4.5 star reviews.
Yeah.
You just lost that sale because
or
that's
an offshore knockoff, right?
Right. Exactly. And it could be any competitor. It could be, and if you're not bidding on your brand name on Amazon's ad system, somebody else is. And that's another thing that I think that people are not understanding is just how Amazon's back end advertising system works. And it's allowed us to get a lot of traction very quickly on Amazon. We scaled up to 6 figures a month in sales there in less than 90 days. And it's, partially because there's not a lot of people in this category that are super sophisticated that are on Amazon. Boll and Branch, which a lot of your listeners will probably be familiar with, not to say ill of anyone, they just raised, I think, $100 million 3 days ago. And congratulations to them. I'm very, very happy for anybody in the space that's successful. But they have, in a year and a half on Amazon, less reviews than we do in 5 months, which just by the way that reviews work means that we've outsold them on Amazon in a third of the time. And they have a 4.0 or 4.1 star rating with something like 26% 1 and 2 star reviews. And we have a 4.5 star rating with only 8% 1 and 2 star reviews. And that to me is like a very strong metric of long-term health is what that channel looks like. And literally looks like. And so anyways, I probably off on a tangent there, but I think that the broader point is that I think that a lot of people look at Amazon either with a lot of skepticism or maybe even fear instead of the massive opportunity that it is if they approach it in a really strong way.
So my takeaway from that is the word suboptimalities.
Yeah. That's a Bridgewater term, by the way. That's something that stuck with me all these years from Bridgewater. Is
in my world, it would be things that suck.
Yeah. That's my team probably hates it when I use that word. It's suboptimalities. Yeah. We had a suboptimality the other day. Funny story. And this is probably not something that I should talk about on air, but we had a packaging.
Go ahead, we're recording.
Well, great. We had a packaging snafu where we had spent all this time and energy and redoing our packaging, and there were really good operational reasons behind it. Right, we had a white box when we first started out, which is just such amateur hour. I mean, white boxes direct to consumer, not a good idea for anyone listening starting a direct to consumer business. Don't make your box white. FedEx and UPS will not treat it kindly. And so we had to put that box into a corrugated box and so on and so forth. So we took a bunch of time to redesign, do a purple packaging. We did a bunch of cute doodles on it, koala bears, eucalyptus trees, Colorado, Rocky Mountains, really beautiful packaging. And the best part about it was we were just going to be able to slap a label on it and purple and wax coating. So it'll survive very well through transit. And we got the packaging run, and I kid you not, the doodles were upside down. So they were all reversed from where they actually should have been. And it's actually really funny. And I think that we're going to be able to get away with it because the Sheets and Giggles brand is like mostly a jester brand first and foremost in terms of brand archetype. And so we're thinking about ways to message it properly because we got to use it. Right. But it was one of those things where when you see it, you just kind of say, how did this happen? And it's just a learning experience, but there's always these, like you said, suboptimalities, and you got to be creative enough to work around them.
So tell us about the Cannabis brand. That was another interesting story in your world that is also packaging.
Speaking of packaging, so I've got these guys, I'll give them a shout out. They're called Sana Packaging, SANA. And they're I think that they're a great example of people who know their demographic. Basically, they are a renewable hemp plastic packaging company based in Boulder, started by CU Boulder grads. And they took a lot of time to get their product they're product folks, but they also had a really great distro strategy, which is they were only going to sell to cannabis companies and differentiate their packaging for them in store. Because like we talked about, and cannabis is an entirely retail channel, right? And the only way that you're going to differentiate on the shelf in Colorado is what your packaging looks like and what your packaging is made of. And so they're a sustainable hemp-based plastic packaging company that makes beautiful designs for their customers, full service company. They launched in February of this year, and I think that now they've already shipped over 1 million pieces of packaging. And I couldn't be prouder of these dudes. And they're friends of mine. They were all competitors of mine in Denver Startup Week last year, which I won the pitch competition first place, big $95,000 styrofoam check. And yeah, it was cool. The buzz around town was, did a betting company just win Denver Startup Week? Which which is fun. But these guys were competition, and they're from their pitch then to where they are now. I couldn't be more impressed with them, and they're a great example of they've gotten offers from a lot of other customers in other categories, including myself. I've said, hey, I would love to work with you on some packaging collab. And they said, no, we're a cannabis first brand. We want to focus on this vertical and really absolutely crush this vertical, even though they're getting offers from apparel brands and, furniture brands and other, blankets and other stuff. And I think it's genius because they're building a brand within this huge growing category that is great word of mouth. And they're building an expertise and a logistics specialty in this space. And I think that a lot of people bite off more than they can chew too quickly, and whether that's with product or especially distribution channel. And I hear this from founders a lot, where I say, "Oh, what's your go-to-market strategy?" And they say, "Oh, it's great. We've got a product that works in physical retail and it's direct to consumer, and we're going to do some B2B sales, and then we've got these insurance partnerships in the works, so we're going to do B2B2C distribution." And I'm just like, how big is your team? Like, what resources do you have? And I think that a lot of people get their eyes just get too big for their stomach, and they try to be all things for all people without realizing that 80% of your sales are going to come from probably one channel, at least in the first few years. And then so find that channel and crush that channel. And then on top,
But I think that I was coaching a larger company, and $400 million public company, that kind of thing, and they decided that the scaling up strategy work wasn't sophisticated enough for them. They were going to go to these blue chip tech strategy firms, and they were going to develop this thing. And the company comes back and they justify their fee that was bigger than mine with this 100-page strategy document, right? Which nobody read. Like 2 people on the leadership team read, the CEO maybe skimmed it, but and certainly not the whole company. And people picked and chose things. But at the end of the day, the problem was they're trying to be too many things to too many different people. Instead of having like one core strategy and maybe a couple of experiments, they had 4 distinct things, only one of which might be considered an experiment. And they were all kind of getting a lot of equal weight in the conversation. I'm like, that's never going to win, dude. Like, it's too complex. Mm-hmm. There's too many irons in the fire. We need to focus on something. And you now think just because you've hit this revenue level, and we've got this many floors of people, and that you can go nuts like this, and you can't. And you can't go up against the multi-billion-dollar companies until you pick off something that's unique and differentiated.
Right, exactly. Right? I mean, I thought the same thing. I think the same thing all the time, especially with web-based companies like D2C companies. There's examples of people who really do it super well, and I think that like Bombas, for example, they're on like this massive run rate this year from revenue. They're a socks company, and they just sell socks, and that's it. They sell socks, and they sell a massive amount of socks. And I was listening to I went to a panel that I was in the audience, and the CEO of Bombas was on the panel. And it was a great fireside chat with him. And it was very inspiring to hear him just talk about how they're focused on this one thing. And that's what they do. And that's why their brand's so powerful. What
you're saying, though, is like, we're seeing again. So your company further along is Away Luggage, Away Travel,
exactly.
Right? I see those damn suitcases everywhere. My daughter has one. People love those things. And they launched now. I have total like luggage fetish, and I'm forever buying a new briefcase or a suitcase. And I spent a lot of time researching my latest one, and then I got it. Now I've been using it, and I like it a lot. Of the last one, the wheels at the base are too narrow, so it tends to be a little tippy. And of course, they swivel, so they turn in, so the tippiness is increased. And now I'm looking again at the ones that I didn't consider and looking, but all that's irrelevant. The people care about these things, and a brand like that launches onto the scene and kicks ass on a global basis, direct to consumer, breaks in because they see that the rules are changing, that you can go direct to consumer, and they launch a whole new brand. Right. And meanwhile, Toomey's got expensive luggage in stores, in malls, so old school, and how much is actually sold that way. And I see all these Away bags rolling through the thing, but they're not in they're not in any of the stores in the airport.
Right.
Around. I don't know. They might have a couple of showcase brand stores now, but for the most part, it's a direct to consumer.
I'm a big fan of Away. We're in the same portfolio as Quip, which is the big toothbrush direct to consumer.
Yeah. I have two Quips. One for my travel bag, and then one in my bag.
And we share investors with Imperfect Produce, which is like a subscription based service for produce every month. That's it's like Imperfect, so it's like got different shapes and stuff. And these companies are so impressive and so incredible to me, not because they are these large umbrella brands. And I think that you can do that eventually. Like we talked about Mike Dubin and Dollar Shave Club earlier. They started with one thing, right? This guy, his buddy's dad had a factory with like 250,000 razors like sitting there. And Mike was like, well, let me just shoot a YouTube video. Maybe we can sell these on the internet. And now they've got all their, big line of bathroom products, and they're acquired by Unilever for $1.6 billion. Native deodorant. All they do is sell deodorant, acquired for $400 million. There's all these examples of people that have done this. And that's what really attracted me to the space is, you don't need to have thousands of SKUs or products. You just need to really crush one specific category. And so I think that we've done things slightly differently in the sense of, the joke is if you want to start a successful direct-to-consumer brand like Casper or Allbirds, just pick a commodities market, go hire Red Antler, which is a firm in New York that does media stuff, and then just sit back and let them do everything for you from a brand perspective. And we've taken a slightly different approach where I think that I'm more interested in like a slow and steady wins the race type of growth. So we're doing 4x this year from last year in our second year of business, not 50x. And I think that that's the way that I like it because it makes us have a very rigorous focus on our unit economics and our profitability first and scalability second. And that's the business that I want to build. And I think too few startups do that. And so you hear the success stories, but there's also, plenty of failures that take the wrong path.
Well, if you're going to do the 10x, 50x, or whatever in a year, we also did a show on that with Chris Ye on Blitzscaling. That's another topic. We tend to be very happy with doing anywhere from 25, 30% a year to doubling every year. I kind of love clients who are doing 50% or better every year and want to sustain that kind of thing. But it's transformative and it's challenging and it's definitely not for everyone. Let's wrap up a couple of things I think that are useful, and then we've spent a lot of time talking here, giving people a lot to think about. But I think that we see a lot of folks with existing companies start to go online and then lose a lot of money, fail badly, blow tons of money with vendors and AdWord marketing and bad campaigns and Facebook campaigns that produce nothing. It's very easy to scream into the void. But the thing I heard in the beginning with your story was that you did what we talk about all the time, bullets before bombshells. Right. So you did some experimentation. You tested some assumptions. I was at a workshop a couple of weeks ago, And we had people talking about hijacking search engine traffic and how to be really smart about that using some of the latest tools. And then somebody else talking about how creative is king now in Facebook advertising and how to develop your creative from a different set than some of us learned in more traditional marketing stuff years ago. We would start first with copy, and then we would move into the visuals and things like that. And they, in fact, start with the visual side of things and the concepts, and then they iterate down. And the copy is very late in the stage where they're actually throwing headlines on stuff. Fascinating, right? But they're talking about interrupting people's flipping through their timeline. And whether it's their Instagram, the rules are different. So I think the big thing that I heard and that we've talked about before is bullets before bombshells. Test some stuff, move in it. I think
there's two things there that I would agree with and build on. One is the bullets before bombshells. We did 50 different ad variants with I think something like 12 different landing pages. We tested H1s, H2s, different CTAs, button placement. I always love the A/B test of like, have you tried a different color button? It's a button, like, just make it blue. And so we narrowed it down to, I think 3 ad sets with 4 landing pages that captured emails, and we got our capture rate up from like the 30s in the beginning to 46% number that I mentioned earlier over the course of, a few months capturing emails ahead of launch. So definitely being willing and able to just test a ton of different stuff. And the second thing is that stuff has to be, frankly, it has to be jarring. And this is tough for a lot of established brands to do because they worry about their parent brand and about their larger umbrella corporation. And so they take a safe route. And the problem with that is that when you're scrolling through Facebook, everything looks the same. And so you really have to zig where everybody else is zagging. And that's what I loved about this betting industry is that it's a totally blank canvas because everybody is very undeservedly serious. I mean, we're making betting, we're not curing diseases. And so our number one performing ad set has been 3 men in a bed with beards, with avocado face masks on, with red wine, and they're just talking in bed. And when 80% of our customers are women, and women love that for some reason. I can't, and a lot of men love that too.
My dude friends don't have any sleepovers.
So when you're scrolling through your Facebook feed and you see 3 men in a bed together, it's comedic. It's representative. It's non-heteronormative. It makes you stop and pause and say, "What the hell is this?" Then you see the brand name. You see we've got comments and likes and all. And the other pieces, and this is a lesson for anyone listening, or I hope it is that I see so many brands with Facebook ads and people are commenting on the ads and they're asking questions and they're engaging and they're curious and they've got to the point where they're leaving a comment on a Facebook ad. That person's about to buy your product. And there are companies that don't even respond to their Facebook comments. And it blows my mind because you spend all this time and money and energy with the content creation and the spend and the click through and then somebody comments and you're not going to respond to that person and engage them. And then guess what? Your comments count in terms of the total comment count on Facebook. And so when people are scrolling through and they see, 3,000 comments, maybe only 1,500 of those are from actual humans and 1,500 are responses from you. And that's that social proof is extremely powerful with click through. And so that's one of my biggest pet peeves with companies actually is.
But I think you're taking for granted something that a lot of our listeners need to pay attention to, and that's that funny and different and weird works in the online ads, and standing out some way, being a little more playful and original is different than the be simply
aspirational stuff is very tired, and I think a lot, especially when you're talking to millennials, which is now I'm a millennial, and it goes all the way up through I think 37 now are millennials, so it's not it's not kids out of college. I mean that's Gen Z. Now when you're talking to millennials, you're talking about people with real buying power and spending power, and I think that the aspirational stuff, like for my category, the white sheets with the white walls. There's always like a French press coffee placed ever so precariously on a white comforter. It's like, it's very, it's tired.
It's tired.
Yeah, and so we
attention.
love that because it's kind of just a huge open space for us to take a sledgehammer to. And it's also hard to replicate funny. Funny is one of the hardest things to do, right? It's why there's so few big name comedians that you actually recognize. Funny is extremely difficult to replicate. So, but not every brand can do it because they built these brands over decades, sometimes on aspiration and a sage brand voice. And I see a lot of companies actually spinning up secondary brands to sell their products white labeled under with different brand voices.
All right. Well, we've given folks a lot to think about. And I think a lot of good takeaways here. If you want to find out more about his company, Colin McIntosh company is Sheets and Giggles. You'll find it at sheetsgiggles.com. Of course, we'll put that in the show notes as always. We bring an entrepreneur, a guru, a thought leader, another coach, something every week in the world of scaling up with practical takeaway lessons that you can do. And you'll find over 160 of these episodes, along with free downloads of the tools and worksheets and the ideas that we talk about, special offers from our guests at scalingcoach.com. And as well at scalingcoach.com, if you'd like a free copy of the book, Scaling Up, I'll give it to you for free if you just pay the shipping and handling. So all that, scalingcoach.com. Thanks again, Colin.
Thanks so much, Bill.
We'll talk to everybody again next week. Oh, big thanks to the original growth guru, founder and creator of all things Rockefeller Habits and Scaling Up, Vern Harnish. This show is produced by Lucy Summers. The audio production is done at Podfly Productions. The audio editing by Albert Burge. The show notes are compiled by Ian Cudina and proofread by Tim McGowan. If you loved it, please share it, pass it along to somebody else. Like it, subscribe it, get them every week. Give us a review so we can grow the show. You can let us know the parts that you love. Drop us a line, drop us an email to info@scalingcoach.com, or just ask for more of what you want, info@scalingcoach.com. Thanks again for listening. Keep scaling up.